Dr. Ev, and I want to talk to you about what is the chiropractic adjustment, what is happening when we are using chiropractic to impact our nervous system, and why does it work. So, a lot to cover, a little bit nerdy, but stay with me. I want to introduce you to the idea of this cycle of overwhelm. Our nervous systems are taking in a ton of information all the time. They are responsible for perceiving, receiving all of the information that we get from our environment, and then trying to process that information and integrate that information, and then also to respond to that information. So, what can happen is when there's just too much coming our way at any given time, which is often in today's society, and our bodies being the intelligent design that they are, rather than just missing out on a bunch of this information, if we don't have a moment to process it, or we can't process it when it's coming in, then we disconnect. And two ways that this disconnect can happen. One, we take that information and we just store it away in the body for another time when we have a moment to connect to it and integrate it. A second way in which our neurology disconnects is when we're feeling threatened or stressed. Then we go into a physiological stress response like fight or flight or freeze, and we actually turn off the connection to the prefrontal cortex, or the front of our brain, our logical mind, and we end up operating from a more illogical, more primitive part of our brain. So imagine now that either of those two disconnect systems has happened, and we start to get some distortion or dysfunction over time. If we have this information excess kind of pattern overlaying and storing in our tissues, then that can start to cause some distortion in the muscles and in the physical body, some tension patterns. If we have some parts of our brain shut off that aren't operating, then our body's just kind of on autopilot, and what it tends to do here is just default to a strategy that has worked well for it in the past. That strategy isn't always the most appropriate strategy, and so we can start to get some dysfunction, right, in the system there. And with enough distortion and dysfunction piling up over time, that's when we start to get dis-ease in the system, when things start to feel like they're not working quite right. We start to get miscommunication. Things aren't coordinating to the best of their ability, and we might start to feel pain in the body. And unfortunately, when we have these miscommunications and miscoordinations, and we have these patterns of disconnect, then that leads to more overwhelm in the system, less resilience, less that we can handle, and the cycle kind of continues itself. So just to recap, pretend we are at a music festival and there is so many people there that the signal is jammed. That's our overwhelm. Now that leads directly to disconnection, because you can't get a text out and you can't get a hold of your friends. So what happens when you can't communicate with your friends is some dysfunction. You end up missing them, you end up losing them, you end up not knowing where they're headed or being able to tell them where you're trying to go. And that ends up leading to some dysfunction, because now you're standing there trying to find them, trying to figure out where they might be, maybe going back to the last place you saw them rather than enjoying the concert. And this leads to some dis-ease, because now you're nervous about where they are, how you're ever going to find them, and you're bummed that you're missing your favorite musician. So you just get more overwhelmed in the process. So how does chiropractic work? What is the adjustment? Well, adjustment is really an opportunity for for you to reconnect with certain parts of your nervous system. In a physical manifestation, chiropractors use a word called subluxation, which means translated literally into less than illuminated, to describe areas of our spine and nervous system that are not functioning optimally or that there is a little bit of disconnect in that area. We can determine where there's disconnect based on function, based on how the tissue is responding, and based on your body's overall global strategy around. So, by adjusting an area, what we're doing on a physical sense is allowing the full range of motion of that specific joint area. What range of motion really is, though, is information, it's feedback, it's communication, it is accurate data for our body so that our body can accurately map itself and understand what's going on in any given area. The more accurate data points that the body has to deal with and work with, the more accurate the response you're most likely going to get. So, a simple thing as a chiropractic adjustment, not only are we working with the tissues themselves to improve range of motion, but what that does is actually create more awareness and connection to those areas of our nervous system that we were disconnected from. When we create more connection with the nervous system, then we create more accurate responses and a greater sense of safety. We also help to integrate old experiences that were laying over our tissues, kind of causing some of that distortion. When we remove that distortion and that dysfunction from the body and we create more accurate communication, then we get less dis-ease because our body is functioning how it should, which is self-organizing, coordinating, and healing. So then we have less overwhelm. We actually have a better system that's able to encounter more. We create more resilience and we become a lot more adaptable to the things that come our way. And we get better health outcomes from this. So, in a nutshell, that is what is happening with your chiropractic care. That is what is happening with every given chiropractic adjustment. And we can be so grateful to our bodies for being so innately intelligent, having this system in place, having this beautiful access point from what we can affect on the outside that impacts us so deeply on the inside. And knowing that when we have a cohesive being in here, that will change our experience and how we're able to respond to everything that is out in our lives out there. So I hope this was interesting to you. I hope it was easy to follow, and I hope that helps you feel more excited about the care that you're receiving here at the office. Anytime you want to nerd out, I look forward to chatting more about it. All right, I hope this helped you.